This is the BEMA podcast with Marty Solomon. I'm his co-host, Brent Billings. Today, we are breaking ground with a first-time ever Monday episode of BEMA, beginning the continuation of our review of The Chosen with a discussion on the first episode of Season 2. Beginning the continuation, Marty.
Beginning the continuation. Breaking ground. I love it. I love everything about it. We're putting out some bonus content, Brent Billings. It's just so good. Hopefully a surprise. I mean, I almost leaked it here and there. I said more than you probably liked me to. But
let's be realistic. People probably know this is coming.
But we are finally here. And I love this because it also gives us a chance to hear, like, to say that we're hearing the feedback from our listeners. So when we got back to like a verse by verse journey through John, the overwhelming consensus, Brent, was this is what you guys do. Like this is BEMA. Thank you for being back. And part of me is a little like, I don't know if I'd call it frustrated by, people are like, I love it when you guys do Bible, but I don't know what else we've been doing. Like everything we do is Bible. We're either trying to apply the Bible or we're talking about like The Chosen. We're talking about, a drama about the Bible. Like it's all Bible, but I think I understand what people are saying. So what you're saying here is a commitment, Brent, to not. Now, some people freaking loved. Can I say frickin' on a podcast? They
say
loved.
Whatever you want. I'll beep it out. I'll beep it out and make it sound worse if you want.
Please don't. They loved, like we actually got a ton of new listeners because of the Chosen commentary we did for season 1. So some people absolutely loved that portion of session 6. It's one of their favorite portions. And that's great. And that's the thing about session 6 that we've discovered is everybody likes different things. Some people love the interviews where we get to talk to people about the books they've written or what they do. And some people have, that's like been their favorite parts. And some people are like, I don't really care about that. And then other people like loved The Chosen. And then some people were pretty frustrated. They're like, I don't really want to watch The Chosen. I don't love The Chosen, like whatever. So it's always like this hit or miss experience. That's the nature of humanity. But the overwhelming consensus is that people love Bible content from us. So where we moved the Chosen commentary to a bonus episode. So, you probably will see these on like a Monday. And your Thursday episodes will remain committed. For those of you that are like, I don't really want to do you don't have to take 8 weeks off while we do season 2 of The Chosen. We'll still give you all the BEMA content that you desire. And for those that love Chosen, a bonus experience every week. So it couldn't be any better. And we're probably learning from this, Brent. I don't want to make too many promises about what the future will look like. That's always a bad practice. But I have a feeling like we're learning, we're taking notes, and in the years to come, I think we've got this 2022 mapped out for what we hope to accomplish in 2022. Like that's probably a thing. But we also have this, we're also learning. And I think in the years to come, we may be, I don't know if it'll be like a spin-off podcast where we put some of that other content, some of the application, some of the interviews, some of those things in like a separate feed, whether we do more bonus episodes, like who knows, but we're trying to learn. We're going to try to keep growing this teaching team that we have. And if I can lean on them and their help, we can make sure we have a steady stream of Bible content always coming our way. So I think if it's any indication for what the future holds, I think we're learning and we're going to try to keep heading more and more and more in that direction. It'll take us some time. And I would love to say that all of this is possible because people have been supporting our podcast financially, making donations. That link is always there in our show notes if you want to join our team of supporters. And I don't want this to be too commercially. I always have to walk this fine line between feeling like I'm a televangelist asking for people's money and just speaking honestly and truthfully about when you guys give, it's a big deal because what it allows us to do is help pay people like Elle and Reed and Josh to help us teach, to help us create content. There are other people that we have a strategic plan. We would like to hire some people that could help us keep producing more content. We just need help because there's only so many hours in a day. There's only so many hands on deck, and we got to do what we can with that. And so the support that you guys are sending in and giving so generously is enabling us to continue down this road. And I love to do this. I'm a creative. I love to create content. So I love it. Would you add anything to that, Brent, before we get in?
I will just echo the fact that I'm super thankful for all of our donors, and I am excited every single day to get to do what I do. And I love the new people that we've brought in, and we have other new people on the horizon who I'm quickly falling in love with in a working sense. And it's great. We have an enthusiastic set of groups on the map. We have over 300 groups on the map now, which is just every single time I look at the map, it does not ever get old. I am just amazed that there are so many people who are willing to step out and find community and wrestle with this stuff in the same way that we've been doing. So yeah, it's good.
Amen and amen. I'll second that all day long.
So anyway, we will do The Chosen, and they will be bonus episodes. So they will not slow us down in our quest to go through John verse by verse. And also, hopefully, the fact that they are bonus episodes means we can probably even get to them sooner next time around. So we're playing catch up with season 2, but maybe by the time season 3 comes out, our episodes on them will be closer to when they actually release.
I do love that. Nope, it's going to be great. And I think that's a good segue into diving into season 2 right now.
Yeah. So just some general commentary on the production of The Chosen. So they did season 1. They crowdfunded it. Relatively small number of people contributed to that first season, and they produced that, and it was popular, and they said okay, and so they went forward and they made season 2, and season 2 has grown substantially beyond that. And so apparently they have enough confidence at this point that they will be able to finish out the entire 7-season vision that they had, from the beginning. They thought like this could be 7 seasons, but the first season, it's like, well, we're going to close out season 1 and see what happens, and go from there. And God has provided enough support for them that they said, we are confident that we're going to get through all 7 seasons. So they sat down and wrote apparently season 3 through 7 all in one big chunk. So I am personally curious to see how that affects the way things are broken down and laid out going forward from season 3 specifically. It's not going to have as much effect on season 2, but they wrote the rest of it after season 2 all in one big chunk. They just went off on a retreat, the writers, and they actually added somebody to their writing team, a pastoral perspective. And I think it's good. So they have their end. They have everything mapped out. They know exactly how everything's they know what their last episode is. They know how they're breaking everything down. So I think it's good.
It's amazing. It's fascinating to me. I love it. I love all the behind the scenes stuff that you find out. It's just such a cool little learning experience.
And I will say, I saw on a table in their little video where they were talking about writing out the seasons, they had I think it's Thomas and Gundry's Harmony of the Gospels.
Yes.
And they had one other Harmony of the Gospels.
There's another one. I can't think of the name behind it, but Thomas and Gundry is my Bible college textbook.
I will say that none of the books looked particularly used. So
they were just crisp. They had gotten a new copy for their work.
Yeah. I first went through that Harmony back when I was in high school, and knowing what I know now, with the BEMA perspective and how each gospel writer had their own thing that they were doing, their own audience, I just have so much respect for anyone even attempting to harmonize the gospels. It's not really possible the way the gospels are written to harmonize them. But for a show like this, you kind of have to do that.
That's true. It's a great example of a place where harmonizing makes sense.
Yeah. So, and we'll get into that as we talk through the episodes, because there are some things that are just like, oh, well, this happened in John 1, but season 3 had the scene from John 3. And it's like, well, what are you going to do? So
Yep.
I think we should get into the episode itself. So here's our spoiler horn. Let's do it. So we actually start off the episode in the future with Simon and the other disciples being interviewed. They're initially just looking into the camera, and the interviewer turns out to be John. And John is writing down notes, he says, for a future book. It seems like he doesn't have anything specific in mind. He just wants to make sure he has all the stories recorded while he has the chance. Big James has just died in this part of the timeline, and so he's like, his mom, Mary, is saying like, you should probably be mourning your brother.
Yeah, she talks about sitting Shiva.
Yeah,
and she says, "Why are you doing this during Shiva?"
Yeah, and he's like, I just gotta get this stuff written down before it's too late. Like, who knows, how long any of us will be here? So I gotta do this now.
Which is so interesting because, like, traditionally speaking, like there is that passage in John where Jesus talks about, you're not going to die in the same way at the same time. And there seems to be some tradition and evidence that suggested that there was like this because of those words, like people were aware of that conversation that Jesus had with John. And it led to kind of like some urban myths, if you will, surrounding John. So it's interesting that John had that angst here. I didn't mind that at all. I don't think that was done in ignorance. I loved that part of it, but I did find it interesting, like, oh, and he's the guy that everybody thought is going to live forever.
Yeah, well, I think his angst is more that he's not going to get the stories out of the other disciples before they die.
Oh, great point. Yeah. Sure, I get that. Okay. Yeah, I'm feeling it. Okay.
Although, you'd think he would be familiar with the stories, but whatever. You never know. Like, it's just like, hey, remember back on that time, like, we talked about this and you said this, and what were you actually thinking? That sometimes you don't get those perspectives until much later. So I think it's appropriate.
Well, and as an academic, I've kind of loved and I know a lot of people haven't. I've heard the exact opposite from other folks commenting on this, but like we always talk about Q source, that there was this source material behind the Gospels that got passed around and circulated. And I love this idea that they're using here in The Chosen of Matthew's writing stuff down, John is writing stuff down. All these people are like cataloging, interviewing, this commitment to, we have to be able to pass on these stories, and the cataloging of it, I really do love. And the academic in me kind of loves to I could see that being like kind of the foundation for Q source. And so it just really cool.
Yeah. At one point he's interviewing Matthew, and Matthew's sharing some details of a story, and John says, it doesn't need to be precise. And Matthew's like, why wouldn't it need to be precise? Mine will be precise.
I loved that line. That was so great. And I even loved it in relationship to my personal opinions about, it's one thing about character development within The Chosen, but I do love that particular character and his development and how it relates to his gospel, because you've heard me talk about Matthew. I would actually agree with that, and I love how they've worked that in. I am such a sucker for this part, this opening, whatever you want to call this scene, this opening section of episode 1 here, season 2. And I was like, man, am I just a sucker for this stuff? And no, because I'm critical. I'll have a couple critical moments, and I was pretty critical of the Christmas one, and I was pretty critical of the last episode of season 1. So I'm not just like bowled over, but man, I did love this opening scene. So many super clever, relevant, and now I'm getting ahead of myself in my notes. I love the emotions that they worked into this. Like little John, like kind of like emotionally kind of breaking down, like how much I miss him. And I love it wasn't just cerebral interviewing, note-taking. Like there were emotions with these people, emotions. There was even humor with Peter. And I loved that element of this whole opening scene. It was just, I love how Mary says the whole, if you wrote so much if you tried to write this all, there's not enough books in the world that could contain it. And I'm like,
yeah, Mary gets
what
the
a
credit
beautiful,
for that. Yep.
I know what a beautiful like little toss towards honoring Mary with the closing verses of John. We can't, that's pure speculation, but I loved that writing. That was just such good writing for me, that John would honor his spiritual mother passed on to him by Jesus on the cross, take care of this. And tradition says she lived with him until her death in Ephesus. Like, I just loved the idea of John. I love the idea that idea could have come from her. Pure speculation, but
yeah,
I just love that. It was so good.
Well, and following that tradition, like, it would make sense. Like, all the other people would come in from different places. He would be interviewing them, writing down the stories, and then at the end of the day, he's sitting there with Mary, processing through all this stuff. And the scene closes where they're discussing, like, okay, but how do we actually get into this story? Where do we start this thing? And so they're mulling that over, and then we get the credits. So then we're back into our regular timeline. John and Big James are tilling the ground, and they're discussing why they're the best disciples. That was a great little moment.
You know, I'm catching so many things in this second and third watch through that I didn't catch the first go around when I went through the season, which is always true, obviously. But I have started noticing whenever James talks, he is in love with actions, deeds, doing. Like, almost every conversation in this episode, it's almost always tied to, like, there's something to do, there's work to be done. And I just thought of that in relation to, you know, potentially the book of James, depending on how you want to tie the James and who the James is and who the author James is. I just loved that. You know, I don't know how much that's being done intentionally, but I just love that being worked into the character development too.
Be a great question to ask, because I would not be surprised if that's intentional. But yeah, that's a great find.
But that would be taking a different theory on who the author of James is. So, yeah. I mean, and they've also very clearly not taken my theory, but there's lots of ways to kind of like pull these James characters. There's a lot of theories out there about who is James and how do you explain it and who is who and all that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, who knows? But there's a lot of that I noticed in this season. A lot of very and you don't have to do this. They do not have to put this much illusion, this much work behind. They don't have to be this clever. It's easy to overdo this or make it cheesy or corny. And the work they're putting into it it just continually impresses me with their character development. It's so good. I enjoy it.
I think I'll link our episode on James as well as your addendum video talking about the identity of James for anyone who is curious about that conversation.
And if you do that, look at the comment thread. There's one pretty lengthy response that was done very graciously and respectfully, and gives an argument against my position. And it would be the logical, respectful argument. I would totally affirm it. I would be like, it's not where I land, but if I had to land somewhere else, I totally love. So even then, I would even shout out the person in the comments that was like, I appreciate the challenge, but I think you're wrong. I love it. I love it. Love it.
That's what we do here. We wrestle with a lot of different ideas.
That's right.
So then we have Thomas and Rama, and they're looking at a map, trying to figure out how to find Jesus, how to find this Samaritan town that he's in. And then we see Simon coming in to report on the growing crowd. Andrew comes back at some point. He's like, don't know where Jesus is right now. So then everyone kind of scatters and starts looking for him. And then we find Jesus. The audience finds Jesus first. He's working on repairing a man's cart. And the man says, you know, you're pretty good at this. Maybe you should stay in town, open up a shop. And then Fatina comes in. She's the woman from the well. She comes around the corner, and the man with the cart, he's like, oh, this woman, she's going to introduce you to every Samaritan in the entire country. and Jesus is like, yeah, that's kind of the idea, I think.
No, it's good. A lot of clever moments there. No notes in my notebook, but yeah, I appreciated appreciated that scene too.
So then Thomas and Rama arrive at the house. Matthew answers the door, and there's a little bit of tension there. Matthew doesn't actually end up letting them in, but then Mary arrives and introduces everyone, brings everyone in. Big James and John show up from the field that they've been working, and there's just like some relationships that are being introduced and some tension that's kind of sitting there in the room. And then we come back to Jesus, and he's teaching to a relatively small crowd compared to what we'll see later, I think. But so little James comes around the corner, discovers him first, and then Simon and Andrew come in from the other side, and then we see some harmony going on here, where Jesus is he's talking to a shepherd in the crowd, and he's drawing the story of the lost sheep out of this shepherd and doing his lost sheep teaching in this moment.
Well, I don't even know if I would call it harmony as much as I love the suggestion that while Jesus is in Samaria, he's gathering all this teaching material from Samaritans. And like if any disciples, if that were true, pure speculation, like the disciples would have maybe overheard that. And then when he tells the story later, like they would realize like, oh man, he got that from Samaria.
Right.
He got that from the Samaritans. But I did love the possible idea that some of those ideas, I just loved that he would call out a shepherd in a Samaritan setting. And yeah, it was just good. Loved it.
Yeah, I just mean harmony in the sense of we're sort of more or less in John 4, but then this story that appears in Luke 15 is being pulled in to this part of the story.
Sure. And I love when they do that, because it allows me to think these stories weren't just like one-offs. Like these stories probably were told numerous times in numerous settings and numerous occasions, and who knows where he picked it up and shaped it and learned it and all that. But a story that's told later in the harmony of the Gospels was a story that probably was told already 20, 30 times. Just like if you were to follow Marty around, you'd hear me teach the same lesson 20 or 30 times. Like I do love, I think we said that too in season 1, the way they mix that into the teaching times of Jesus. They cross-reference material so much.
Absolutely. So then we have a shot of a man out in the countryside, and he comes up and sees the field that John and James have been working on. And then we jump back into town. Jesus and his disciples are returning to the house, and Jesus is meeting some people and meets Rama's father, Kaphni, and says...
Now in that scene a moment ago that you'd referenced, where the man is... that's the scene where we actually see the man has a bad leg. He's on a crutch. Is that correct? Does my memory serve me correctly?
I do think we see that. It's very, very brief. He's he doesn't even see anything. It's just he walks up and you get the sense like, oh, somebody has done this for me.
Right.
But we'll definitely get a lot more of his story later. So Jesus is making arrangements with Rama's father, Kaphni, and says, hey, we should talk in the morning. Then he goes and finds James and John, who are just like devouring a bunch of food, and they seem a little embarrassed. And Jesus is like, hey, tell everybody else about what you've been doing. And so then the next morning, the disciples all go to the market to buy food for dinner. There starts to be all these arguments about who's in charge of what's going on here, who knows what, who's in the loop, who's not in the loop. But they do disperse eventually and go get all their stuff. Jesus has been, teaching and meeting people. And so Simon goes up to buy some wine, and they give him extra wine because they're enthusiastic about what Jesus is doing. And then Fatina finds Simon and asks him to deliver a message to Jesus. So then as they start to come back to the house, Rama returns, and she finds her father there, who's upset because he's been waiting for Jesus, did not have his meeting first thing in the morning like he expected. Jesus comes back. They exit the room. They have their discussion. Kaphni's like, look, I don't really feel that comfortable with it, but at the same time, you totally saved my business, my reputation, everything. So whatever. So he leaves. He sees Thomas on the way out and warns him about the potential foolishness of following Jesus. And And he's like, look, I know you're going to come ask me someday for my daughter's hand, and I honestly don't know what I'm going to say.
Yeah, and that whole conversation with the dad and Jesus and all of that, I felt like was a good representation historically of the patriarchy of that world. And I think they're walking this line really well throughout The Chosen. And I don't mean what I'm about to say to come off as some like support of patriarchal systems, but in the reality of historical patriarchy, they're demonstrating how it could obviously be held very abusively, very oppressively. It could also be held with a sense of compassion and all the things that you would want. If you're going to be talking about historical patriarchy, you're seeing the bits and pieces there that you would want to see in that. A dad who cares, still respects the autonomy and the humanity of individuals involved, but it also depicts, I think, accurately the historical setting of how those patriarchal relationships. He travels just to go talk with Jesus. He can't just send a message. He himself has to be there as the father, as the patriarch. Like, I just find that to be a good representation, and one done, in my opinion, tastefully. And again, I don't say that to support ancient systemic patriarchy or to take a stand on complementarianism or whatever. I appreciate how they're showing that and still depicting so many other parts of the conversation. So
is that tension realistic of like him being willing to give up the stewardship of his daughter's safety in exchange for the reputation of his business, essentially?
I don't know about the exchange of it, but there's definitely this acknowledgement of like honor, this cultural shame and honor culture, and like the sense of like almost like personal debt, like he's indebted to the character and integrity of Jesus, and what he's doing like bothers him to no end, but he can't argue with that. And now he kind of somewhat owes, I don't know if I would say he owes Jesus, but he owes this thing a chance. He owes this thing a shot. And so I don't know if it's so much like this transactional exchange as much as like a cultural. Yes, the short answer to your question is yes. I do think that's there. Maybe not in this, whatever I'm trying to say. Not in a scorekeeping sense, but in this really interpersonal. I see you and you've seen me, and I don't really like any of this, but I'm trusting. Let's call back to session 3. It's a great opportunity to see a good eye. When this dad could have an evil eye and even be justified in doing so, you're seeing, because of this exchange that they've had, a good eye rise above the circumstances. And I like that.
All right. Sounds good. So then we have Jesus out with his guys. They're inspecting the field, and tells James and John they did a great job. And they turn and head toward the house of the owner, whose name is Melech. And Jesus tells them, like, yeah, we're going to be dining at the house tonight. And as they approach, comes out to greet him, says thanks for the field. And he's like, look, James and John did the work. And Melech says, look, I can't offer any money. I don't have anything here. And Jesus is like, well, we were thinking about sharing a meal. And he's like, well, I don't have any food either. And Jesus is like, we got all that stuff. So, if you've got the space, if you're willing, we'll sit here. So, then you see him, at the fire, I believe after the meal, the disciples are telling stories, the family's asking questions, exactly what you would expect out of a late night campfire, I think. And then Melech reveals he broke his leg by falling off of a horse, and he insinuates that he was stealing the horse after Jesus asked a few questions. And then the wife and daughter excuse themselves and to get ready for bed, and Melech kind of continues. He's like, look, if you really knew who I was, you would not help me. And Jesus is like, no, please tell me your story. And so Melech recounts basically the Good Samaritan story, but from the perspective of the robbers who beat the man up and left him there for dead. And Melech is all torn up about this, and he's like, whatever, this guy's probably dead. This is my fault. And Jesus is like, look, actually the guy lived. Don't worry about it. Trust me. And then, as they get through that story, then they're getting ready to get up and leave for the evening. And Jesus makes a joke about, maybe we should be careful. You never know who's lying in wait out there on the road on their way back to town.
Yeah.
A very modern joke, but I absolutely love it.
Yeah, and I do appreciate those moments considering the humor that Jesus may or may not have had. I do appreciate that. Again, we see Jesus potentially getting material from the Samaritan setting. I don't think you have to have a parable based on a real life event. It's interesting to consider that in light of this. I don't know if I would have, and obviously there's kind of like that God goggle element potentially here. It's not required. I wasn't in love with that. I probably would have slightly written this scene differently if I was the one writing, but then the scene wouldn't have been as good because I'm not a screenwriter. But there's this, I kept toying with the, again, I don't know what the writers are aware of or what they're trying to allude to. I kept toying with the remez that we discussed about the Good Samaritan in 2 Chronicles 28. And if there is this 2 Chronicles 28 allusion, Melech is Hebrew for king. And the allusion to Chronicles is like the king of Samaria is the one that tells the people in the Chronicles passage to send the donkeys back. And I appreciate what they were doing in the scene there where Jesus was saying he didn't die. In the scene, they're trying to show Jesus assuaging his guilt. Let me deal with this guilty conscience that you have, which I appreciate what that does for the screenwriting of the scene. I would have loved to have spun this around in such a way where it was like, okay, well, the story did end that way, but the story could also end a completely different way. And historically, it even did. Historically, in 2 Chronicles 28, the king of Samaria even did the right thing. And you could have done some cool things with the character there too, even later having the opportunity to do the right thing rather than the wrong thing. But I digress. Those are the notes I had.
And it's completely feasible that Jesus has encountered whoever it was who is involved in the...
Exactly. Absolutely.
In the other side of the story and just knows the outcome of the story and then happens to
100%
find this guy and makes the connection. So there's,
couldn't agree more.
The God goggles are, our perspectives are intact.
Yes.
There's multiple ways to make this work.
Multiple ways. And I got to quit bringing it up because everybody's starting to email me. So we'll leave it alone.
Yes. That is the thing about our chosen episodes is we have people who are not familiar with the ideas that we have put forth in session 3. So it's like, old school BEMA listeners are, I don't know about on board, but they're at least aware of our perspective. And it is a tension because, it's Philippians 2. It's like, did Jesus actually set aside his divinity to be here on earth? And, to what extent did he do that? That's the tension. So
good old Christology waiting to be unpacked.
Probably a little bit of both in the end. So then they find themselves back in the town and they show up at Photina's house. And her husband answers the door. And if you remember him from the end of season 1, very cranky fellow. And he's like, look, who's Jesus? And he raises his hand. He's like, look, you've got even me in good spirits, in a good mood here. And so he's like, I don't have the nicest place. I don't have enough room for everybody, but we'll make it work. And
yet he has a ton of space. He has a ton of rooms for that setting, that ancient.
Right. Yeah.
And these rooms have space and they have beds, beds, which would be a sign of pretty good wealth. So I love that whole, I don't have much. And boy, does he has some pretty sweet digs there in my estimation.
Yeah, absolutely. So then the next morning, Melech wakes up, finds that his leg has been restored. And then it cuts to a shot of Jesus, and he wakes up and has this knowing smile about the situation, And then John is kind of probing him about that. And he's like, you don't even have to be there to perform the miracle. And Jesus is like, hey, look, someday you're going to do this stuff, even better stuff. And James is like, wait, what a second?
Another statement about doing all the things that you'll do. And James is like, you got my attention. Yeah.
So then Jesus is like, hey, I need some alone time, leaves everyone there at the table while they're having breakfast. And then they're arguing like, hey, we got to have a plan. We need an agenda for all this time. We can plan out the next month, figure out where he's going to go, what he's going to do. And, which is hilarious. Like, I know they haven't been with him that long, but do they really feel like they have? I don't know. But James and John are like, nope, we're going to go talk to Jesus. We're going to propose our plan. And they attempt to do that. And as they get out and find Jesus, some Samaritan men are passing by and they start throwing stuff at them and spitting at them. And this is where James and John are like, hey, maybe we should call down fire. And Jesus is like, nope, we're sowing seeds here. This is where he gives them the Sons of Thunder title. Lots of stuff packed into this little story.
Yeah, there are a couple of statements that I just absolutely loved that came from the scene prior, maybe even two scenes prior. It might have even been when they were, I'm just looking at my notes as you went over that section there. I think maybe even when they were still sitting kind of in bed in the morning, talking with each other with Jesus, James and John were. And I love the line he said,
I don't address everything at once with new converts, Big James.
And he says with new converts, I could take or leave the last two words, but I don't address everything all at once with it. He was referring back to the man that night at the house, and there were things that he talked about and things he didn't talk about and things he didn't address.
Yeah,
I loved that.
He Fotina's husband said, this room is haunted. There's some ghosts in there from my grandmother or whatever.
Oh yes, that was the setting. Yep.
And then John made a comment the next morning that he, had a little bit of trouble falling asleep thinking about that. And Jesus is like, there's no ghosts here. And then John's like, well, why didn't you just tell him that then?
Yeah. I loved, it was had an element of humor to the exchange, but I also thought there was a ton of wisdom there. And so does the next statement I'm going to share too. There are some real nuggets in these episodes, I feel like, where they take a soft, gentle, compassionate shot at what we tend to do as evangelicals, like try to correct every little thing we ever find to be true and accurate. And I love this statement of Jesus, like, why would you do that? Like, just let, and it's so true with how I've grown and matured even as a Christian leader. Like, I'm just not going to address 90% of the stuff that flies by my windshield. Like, I'm going to wait for those really good moments where it's like, that's worth my time. And everything else, every shred of bad theology, people always ask me, like, how do you go to church? How do you listen to a sermon? How do you know all the history and still, because you just have to let stuff go. Like, just calm down and let it go. Because this isn't about getting every little detail right, we say as we critique an episode on The Chosen. But then the next one comes in the next scene where Jesus gets up and they're like, we need to go with you. And he's like, enough with the protection. And I just have in my notes, like it's underlined like 3 times, like we still do that, theologically speaking. Like we are so convinced that if we're not God's cosmic bouncers, like somehow Jesus is going to like die or be done away with. And he needs us to stand up and protect him. Even today, even not a physically present, literal living Jesus, like the rabbi of the first century, even just the concept, the theological reality of Jesus, we feel like we have to protect. And it is kind of silly. Like you were talking about, like, it's silly to think about them sitting around trying to make plans. And it's silly to think about how we try to protect. Jesus doesn't need our protection. Like he does not need our theological protection. He doesn't need us to make sure that the world doesn't do it. Like Jesus has got it. Like you don't have to cage the lion. He's a lion. The lion will take care of himself. Like we don't. Anyway, I just loved that statement. I thought it was a very artistic, provocative jab in the ribs to what we tend to do as evangelicals. But I digress.
So then we have the disciples come out. They bring the priest of Sychar, and
By the way, before you move on, can I just say how brilliant, I don't have anything to add, just how brilliant that whole Samaritan stone throwing, call down fire from heaven interaction is with James and John, the Elijah connection. They set it up with the whole, did he have us go out there because we were the best at our job, or did he have us go out there because there was a lesson to be learned?
Yeah.
And James is like, I'm not even so sure anymore. And and turns out it was a lesson to be learned. And just the whole way that it was so, and again, the whole scene, I'm just in love with it because of what it could teach us as Jesus following, all of us that would identify as like Jesus following evangelicals, like that whole scene. And I think I'm afraid that we didn't catch it. Like we just watched it and we're like, oh, that's clever. And we didn't catch like the prophetic edge, the gentle but scathing rebuke of the way that we typically order ourselves. Anyway, I just loved that scene. I'm in love with that scene. It's one of my favorites and so good.
I was a little sad that they didn't explicitly mention Elijah when Jesus confronted them, like, call down fire, really? Like that's what you're going to use the power of God for?
Yeah.
And I felt like their response should have been like, oh, like Elijah, right?
Even in that same spot, it was here, but Jesus, it was here. Like they could have had this moment of like, but it was in this very spot that Elijah called down fire. Because that's geographically where they're located.
Yeah.
It's in that very location. But yeah, yep.
But yes, the scene overall, very, very pleased with it. So then we have the disciples coming out, and they bring the priest of Sychar with them, and he's coming to ask if Jesus will come and read in their synagogue. And then they're in the synagogue, and the priest presents them. They have all 5 scrolls of Moses in this synagogue, which I'm like, wow, okay.
Again, and I'm so floored at how historically aware and astute the Chosen is as they have synagogues. They have the priest of Sychar. They have the books of Moses all there. Like the conversation that surrounds the books of Moses and how they don't have the rest of it. Aren't they missing? Like it was so historically aware. It was another case where I was just like, holy cow. Like, and you heard our episode not too long ago with Elle and I, where I feel like you could almost swap. What's the name in the episode of the Samaritan woman?
Fotina.
Like just swap Fotina for that Sychar, the priest of Sychar, and that's how I picture it. Like make those the same character, and I'm in it to win it. But I'm just so amazed at how they have them in synagogues. They have the 5 books of Moses. Like, just well done. I applaud that.
Yeah, my point in saying wow about that is that they would have all 5 scrolls physically there in the one synagogue.
Absolutely, ton of wealth there, which would make sense in the Samaritan subculture. If there's wealth, it would be in Sychar. If there's a ton of communal support and religious fervor, it would be there, sure. Like, but yes, you're absolutely right. I had the same thought when I saw all 5 scrolls. Wow, what a huge thing for them.
And it was nice because they presented the Hebrew names of the books, but then helpfully translated them in the text of the story. So that was nice. And Jesus is like, hey, can you send in my disciple John? And they talk about, what do they do? What do they read? Where do they start? And ultimately, Jesus prods John into suggesting, Genesis 1.
A personal favorite of mine, if I do say so.
Of course. Yeah, definitely. And so then Jesus takes the scroll out, and you see Malak walk in, and the disciples stand up and offer their seat, which I'm a little confused about the seating arrangement there. It was pretty crowded. Like this synagogue probably had, a substantially larger crowd in it than it normally would, I guess. But they make room for everybody, and Jesus begins to read from the scroll, and then the scene ends up being cross-cut with that future scene from the beginning of the episode where John is writing the story. And so you have Genesis 1 woven in with John 1, and that is how the episode ends.
Which was so good. to consider when you consider hearing the words of a gospel like that, and consider when they were very first penned in the midst of emotional firsthand experience. What a powerful way to consider those words and be reminded of the historical setting behind the writing of the Gospels. So yeah, great, love it.
And so early on, like John is crying in the synagogue as Jesus is reading this, which totally makes sense. Like they haven't been together that long. I'm sure he's heard Jesus read in a few other synagogues, but this is probably the first time he's hearing Genesis 1, and to have this piece of scripture that's so meaningful to him, and then hearing it through the words of his own rabbi, like totally get his response to that. So,
and there were some exchanges that definitely hinted at divinity, and you're not quite sure like how much John sees or gets in that conversation, but those tears seem to be connected. And I love how they're portraying that, because they're already working in this special bond, this special relationship, the disciple whom Jesus loved, between him and Jesus. And I mean, that will be a big theme in the Gospel of John, as we're seeing as we go through this, is that relationship between Jesus and the Father, and that whole, and just gives you some potential speculated insight into the things that could have driven that.
And I think just John's general understanding of the power of the word and words in general, and the words of Jesus, and yeah.
Yep.
Okay, well that's episode 1. Any other thoughts before we get out of here?
Not for now. Surprised we did that hour and 5-minute episode in 47 minutes. It's pretty good.
I did kind of gloss over, like there's just so much dialogue and character building, and like tense moments of these people learning how to live together, how to interact with each other, how to, because we talked about it, like these people are from very different backgrounds, and so it's like Matthew has just been called, like this is their first mission, their first outing, where Matthew's a part of it. It's like, okay, what is the tension of like actually accomplishing something in the midst of a tax collector who we've hated for all these years? And so it's definitely an episode that you got to watch to get everything. Like, hopefully people are not listening to this and not watching the show. We're not really doing it justice. We're just talking about, how do we feel about how they portrayed everything. That's what we're doing. But if you're not watching the show, my goodness, please go back and watch it. So, there
you go.
All right.
Yep.
Well, if you want to get a hold of Marty, you can find him on Twitter at Marty Solomon. I'm at EIBCB. And you can find more details about the show at BEMA.discipleship.com. This podcast, if you once again, weird time to jump in, even if you're coming here for The Chosen. Hopefully you would start back in season 1. But yeah, this podcast, we laid out the whole narrative of the scripture in the first about 200 episodes of the podcast. And that's really that's what we're here for. And we're talking about more things. We're talking about application now, but if this is how you're finding the show, please go back to the beginning of our podcast and join us on the journey of God's narrative. So that's all at BEMA.discipleship.com. So thanks for joining us on the BEMA podcast. This special, can I say this week anymore? Because
I don't know.
I don't know how to end this. This is a weird episode in the middle of our release schedule. But
there you go.
I can say that we'll talk to you again soon.
Thunder, the thunder, lightning and the thunder.